Lester Baker has been selected by the mayor and voted by the city council to serve as Framingham's police chief, following acting Chief Brandolini, who stepped in after Chief Stephen Trask retired in June of 2020. Baker, an officer since 1996, has been on the Framingham force since 2003, most recently serving as deputy chief. And now he awaits swearing in to take on full responsibility as chief. Welcome, Deputy Chief Baker, soon to be Chief Baker. So nice to have you here today.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Well, it's wonderful to hear the news that you will be stepping up and serving as Framingham's police chief. And you've been on the force for many years. So I'm curious if you could, why was this the right time? Chiefs have left in the past and others have stepped up to pursue that role. Why was this the right time for you?
I guess the key word you use there is timing. Yeah, chiefs come and go. I'm at a point now in my career, I felt this was the right time to step up and, put myself out there for the role. I've come up through the ranks. I've been an officer, a patrolman, a sergeant, a lieutenant. In 2018, I was promoted to deputy chief, and I was the deputy chief of operations. Each role, I continue to stand into the community, and you start meeting people, and you start seeing where you want things to go. I've been sent to some of the best training available, and with everything going on around the country, what's going on right here in Framingham, I felt this was the time, and it was just a matter of timing.
Mm-hmm. Now, you say with everything going on in Framingham, so what is it that's going on that compelled you?
Just the growth of the city, and I was doing a lot of community outreach, just behind the scenes. I'm not sitting here trying to have my back slapped, but a lot of community programs, a lot of youth programs. I just want to keep forward in that stuff, and I'm in the position now where I can make those visions and bring them to light even more. I was very grateful for the chiefs that before, Chief Trask, Chief Ferguson, and even Chief Carl, all who I've worked for, encourage these types of projects. And the higher the rank I've ascended to, that I've continued these programs, and I just want to continue doing that work.
What's the difference then between deputy chief and chief? I mean, I know ultimately the chief oversees the entire department, but what about the deputy chief?
So the deputy chiefs are right there, and it's basically one is, I was assigned to operations, the day-to-day patrol division, detective bureau, and then we have administration, and then the executive officer. But the chief, it stops with you. This is your vision, your command, and you have to take responsibility for it. The deputy chiefs of all the different sectors that I told you, they're right there, and they're expected to do the same, excuse me.
Mm-hmm. So speaking about, coming up through the ranks and the other deputy chiefs, you've worked alongside so many of the members of the force for years, and now you will oversee the same people that were your colleagues. That's always a tough position to be in. What do you expect, and how will you manage that?
You're cross with that the moment you make the jump from patrolman to sergeant. And if you do it correctly, of course, you're going to have some animosity. One night, that's your peer, and then you're their boss. The way I've always carried myself is, yes, it's correct. I will demand the respect that I am your boss, but I always work, no matter what my rank, I work with the men and women of the Framingham Police Department. And you won't often hear me say, those that work under me or for me. I work with them. There has to be a level of respect for the chain of command. I demand that, but the men and women know that I won't ask them to do anything I won't do myself. And I don't think you'll find a person in this place. I'm firm but fair. I have many people that I can say respect me, like me. They often don't want to hear from me because I like things done a certain way. I like them done timely, and sometimes to my own discredit. Even if they're done correctly, I like them done my way. That's something I got to work on. But, there's a level of respect. You can work with the men and women, but there has to be that level of respect, and I think I've earned that.
Sometimes when people say, I like things done my way, it's usually because they tend to be more perfectionists. Is that how you categorize yourself as well?
Yes, I tend to obsess over things. I want them done perfectly. I want this city, this police department to shine in the brightest light. So, I constantly trying to dot my I's and cross my T's. And sometimes I know I can be a pain, but I'm not doing it just for me. I'm doing it for the city, and I'm doing it for this department.
How will you get that across to your staff members? Is it a matter of trust? Is it a matter of credibility? And is it part of your training plans? How will you create that culture?
You just nailed majority of it. It's definitely trust. And like I said, majority of this police department has worked with me since I've been a patrolman. There's many officers that barely know me. It just comes from trust. It comes by leading by example. I know that's a cliche term, but if you don't lead by example, if you are saying one thing and doing another, especially in police culture, it is gonna blow up in your face. And that is not how I carry myself. I carry myself the same way I expect my officers to carry themselves. So leading by example, trust, getting your message across is another big thing. I just mentioned, to the city council that, I was asked one of the first things that I want to do is, the first thing I want to do is speak with the residents, but I also want to speak with every individual person here at the police department, not just the officers, but the administrative staff, the civilian support staff and everything. Clear communication, getting everyone's opinions and visions and everything out on the table is the way you move forward and move forward successfully.
So do you envision yourself sitting down one-on-one with each person on the force, or will it be in groups? Over what period of time have you been doing it already, or how do you see it rolling out?
So officially, yes, that's how I'm going to do it. And normally in a situation like this, the chief would, pick a date. And obviously with COVID, this wouldn't be able to happen. And we would, get a room and everyone would come and the chief would give his vision. I want to go a little differently. I basically want to sit down one-on-one. Obviously, I will have a scripted something that I want to say. I want to hear from the men and women. I want to hear what they think. And I just want to tailor conversations to each individual. And yeah, will that take some time? Absolutely. But I think that's the best way to go. And as far as for the residents, I would like to get together. I've learned over the years from going to community meetings, you can have one vision, or you go to one part of the community, you say one thing. That doesn't necessarily mean the other part of a community wants to hear the same thing and they don't have that vision. So often we want to talk and push our agenda. I've learned sometimes it's better to listen.
Well, that's going to take quite a bit of time, but it'll be a very interesting process. I imagine that you're looking forward to the varied opinions that you'll hear and all the different input.
Yeah, it's definitely going to take some time. I mean, we're not a Boston PD where this would, pretty much be impossible, but it would take time. But I think the time that it will take is worth the investment. Mm-hmm. Nothing can move forward unless you have people on board, and there's nothing better than getting somebody on board or having a clear message than sitting down, probably over a cup of coffee and having a one-on-one conversation.
You've had an opportunity. I mean, you're not new to the force. You know what a lot of the issues are already, especially within the force. And you say you've done so much community outreach. So you obviously know what a lot of the issues are, and you're inheriting some things that maybe you've observed for a while, but haven't had the authority to take on. So do you have a priority list of things, issue? I mean, I know you want to talk to everyone, but do you have a priority list of action items?
Yeah, my action, and this has already gone into place. Yeah, some things I don't have the authority for, but there are things I do. We all seen what went on around the country this summer. And one of the things that I've had the shift commanders getting out to everybody is we need to build relationships, and you need to stop and listen. A lot of things we took for granted, how people think. I've had so many conversations about, hey, I'm not saying you did this or saying that your officer did this, but this is how I feel. And we need to get out there. We need to rebuild relationships that, some we've already had to build, but you're gonna have to go back and start all over. That's unfortunate, but that's the task at hand. And you need to listen because, you hear somebody say one thing and you get offensive and you want to say, well, that's not so. And maybe it's not so, but that's what they perceive. And sometimes just a simple conversation and listen to someone, you can see where they're coming from and walk in their shoes and just try to have some understanding.
So your relationship with the union is going to be important to get the things done that you want to get done. What will you do to maximize that?
You're absolutely right. And I think the key word is fair. I touched upon that in the community meeting. Officers just want to be treated fairly. Officers don't want bad officers. Officers want the best for their police department, but they want things to be fair. And a testament to the unions is us coming out of civil service. That couldn't have been done without, the support of both unions, and we have that. I have to obviously continue those relationships. That stuff was mentioned in the flag report. I'm sure you're aware of the flag report. Like you said, I am aware of some of the.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit, just so people know what the flag report is?
Absolutely. So to finish up with the union,
Yeah.
I think it just goes back to what I said. You have to lead by example. You have to be fair. You have to be fair but firm. And I look forward to working with them. The flag report was a study that was done back in 2018 that the mayor called for, and it just touched upon the strengths and weaknesses of the police department. And a lot of those issues have been addressed, and we will continue to address them. And that's the report I'm referring to. It's been out there for a while. And there are several issues, a big one was officer wellness, the amount of hours the officers worked and stuff like that. And those were addressed by Chief Trask.
Is there a place where the members of the public can go to see the flag report? Is that something that's available for public viewing?
Yes, the city released that a while ago. So I believe there is a link right from the city. If I'm not correct in that, let me know and I will give you the correct answer.
Okay, and maybe it's even available through the link for the police department. But I'll just mention that link right now. It's www.framinghampd.org. That's a good place to start. And anyone who's interested in seeing the flag report can certainly look there first. And if it's not there, the police department phone number is 508-872-1212. Let's talk a little bit about the morale that you'll be inheriting. What is the morale on the force and in the department right now? And what do you think needs to be done initially to address any morale issues?
I think the morale is good. And morale is good because a lot of the issues in that report have been addressed. But I can't stand on here and stand on the table and pat myself on the back or be complacent. You have to stay on top of morale. And that's obviously key. I would factor that all into officer wellness. I use the term, we have to take care of those that take care of you, that take care of the public. And that's the biggest thing is officer wellness, acknowledging the work that these men and women do and being taking care of them so they can take care of you. And that's the key to high morale and fairness. I think there's nothing right up there with that is you need to be fair. The moment you're unfair, morale is going to go backwards and it's hard to recover.
Let's talk a little bit about the size of the force. Do you feel that you're adequately staffed right now? Will you be looking to increase the size of the Framingham Police Department?
So I think something that is key is obviously, just look outside. The city of Framingham is growing and it's growing very fast. So we don't want to look 5 years from now and go, wow, we should have increased our police department, our fire departments, our schools, what have you. There needs to be a conversation. What is the expected growth of this city and where does our police department stand? With that being said, we haven't truly reached our numbers. We do have to get there. We do have some vacancies. And, I've heard, speaking with the community, I've heard you have enough officers. Why do you want any more? You don't have enough officers. And the immediate goal is obviously to get to your numbers. But I just want to say this. When we are fully staffed, you're able to do more. When you're understaffed, you start basically just staff in the patrol division and you become reactive. You get a service call, you go to the service call, you go to the next service call. When you're fully staffed, that's when you can start doing your programs, your preventative work, your outreach, and prevent the service calls. I would think that everybody in the city, that's what you would want. I know that's what I want. So you want to get your numbers fully there and do more instead of just responding to calls and then going to the next call. You want to have outreach, and you want to have consistent outreach. One of the biggest problems when you do these programs is, you do them when you're fully staffed and you go for a good year, you get the community to buy in, you've built a trust, and then for whatever reason, a year to 6 months later, now I'm pulling people that I said I invested to you, and now you're not there, and it's you've created distrust.
Right. So where exactly are you in staffing? How many vacancies do you have? Is there a pipeline even to recruit from and to bring new officers in?
So yes, obviously you try to get transfers whenever you can. If you have too many vacancies, we're constantly hiring off the list. We have 9 vacancies right now. But one of the biggest things is, when we do hire new officers, it's pretty much a year before we can put that officer, him or her, out on their own. From the moment they go to the academy, to their field training, to their background investigation, you're talking 1 year for an officer to obviously go out on their own. With the contracts finally being settled, years of no contracts, we were able to attract some transfers. We've had a couple of transfers come over. We have some people also applying to transfer. So, we're heading that route too. And when we do come out of civil service officially, we'll be able to give our own exams in a more timely and efficient manner as well.
When will that happen?
We are just waiting for everything to come back from the state. And when that happens, we're good to go. Like I said, both unions agreed to it.
Do you think it'll be within the near future, or will you be waiting another 6 months?
We are hoping it would be tomorrow.
Really? Okay, well, that's good news. And the recruiting that happens for your force, is it through the police department or through the city HR department?
So it's through the city HR, it's through the police force, it's through individual officers, and that is something that I would like to expand upon. I would like to see a cadet program. And if you're not familiar with what a cadet is, I was actually hired as a cadet when I was originally hired in the town of Lexington as a cadet. And a cadet is basically someone that you hire that's looking to go to college, study CJ, maybe between the ages of 18 to 25, and you bring them in. They work in the police department. They do an administrative role, but you're basically instilling your vision, your creed, your goals within that young man or woman within the police department, and grooming them, and then sending them off, become an officer. And now that could work both ways. You may have somebody here when the department says maybe this isn't a right fit for you, or they decide that this isn't a right fit for me. But that's one way of recruiting. Getting out to the universities, Fitchburg State, for one, does a program where you can earn your degree and your certificate from your academy. Coming out of civil service, we will be able to directly go there and recruit, potential officers. So yeah, there's recruitment that we need to do on top of what we've already done.
Well, it sounds like that's a way to create your own pipeline and actually to get some actual experience working together before you even bring someone up in the ranks.
Absolutely. And the biggest one of all, and I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, is just an officer. I wanted to do this job my whole life. I pretty much remember, and I'm going to date myself because most people won't know what I'm talking about, but I had a big wheel. And my goal was I was going to be a motorcycle cop someday. And the officer I saw, I wanted to talk to, I wanted to engage. I pushed that upon my officers. That's what you got to do. So simply being out in the community, you come across a young kid, and simply by talking to them, that's what happens. We have officers here that came up through the PAL program that had no interest in being an officer, and that's why they became an officer. We have officers that just simply, they had no desire to, but they remember an officer from their neighborhood or from the school. That is your best recruiting. That's goal, because you're now taking someone that has a vested interest. This is their community. And now you've got them coming back to serve the community.
How are the needs of the force changing right now? I mean, we're in a weird place right now with the pandemic, and so that's a short-term situation, but it's going to end up creating a new normal, so to speak. Any predictions about what that's going to look like, and how the needs of the force are going to be changing?
It's tough. It's funny because a lot of people hate that word "new normal," but
I know it's
we
become
have to,
it's
we have
throwing.
to come to grips with it. And it was like anything else. Everybody, you're scared of the unknown, but we have a job to do. Um, we take the precautions. We have protection, but we still go out and do our jobs. We try to do it as safely as possible. If we can have somebody come outside as opposed to going inside to take a report, we try to do that. But unfortunately, life goes on, and we have a job to do, and we do it. As far as the new normal, yeah, it's very hard to adapt to, and we have to we have to sacrifice, and we have to cope with it, and whatever comes, and we have to be out there in front of it.
Yeah, and it's certainly you have to take the risk factors into consideration, and I'm sure that impacts what you do in terms of whether an officer is in a vehicle or on a beat or out in the neighborhood. I mean, what ideally would you like to see in terms of how you place your officers?
I I am a big proponent of a footbeat, and that goes to the number of officers. Now, mind you, we are responsible for handling the city's 911 calls, medicals, crimes, fires, accidents. So you have to have a certain amount of cars in these areas to cover those calls. So, but ideally, the best policing goes back to that footbeat. I could flood an area with officers in cars, and they could constantly drive by. And some people think that feels good, but what relationship are we building? What information are they gathering? And when that's just policing 101. So a little bit of both. We also use data and stuff like that to deploy officers and accident times and locations. You can get that stuff at a push of a button, but the actual officer out in the beat, going by a community center, stopping by a school. Some people think it's a cliche that, you see a kid playing a sport and you stop and you play with them for a second and you do a game of wiffle ball or shoot hoops or something. That's huge. Why would you want your child or their only interaction to be with an officer is when they're on a service call or they're at a situation that's bad? I'm a firm believer in that. You just want to have those normal interactions to say on both sides. So the officers realize, these are great people. And it's not just when you're dealing with something bad, it's great people in your beat. And the same thing, that officer, he's just a human being just like you. He's not a bad guy or girl.
Right. Having those relationships is what you're saying makes such a big difference. And I can see that you're very passionate about that. How do you feel about the use of body cams and actually implementing that here in Framingham? I know there's a huge cost factor. There's been a lot of talk about that in the past. Other forces obviously use it, but Framingham does not. What are your thoughts about that?
So before all this conversation came up, that's something we've explored. You're right, it is a huge cost factor, but it's not. And you'd be surprised, and many people think that the officers are against them. Majority of officers are not against them. They know what they see, and often people don't see it.
Right.
So there is a cost factor, and that's something that has been explored, and we're still exploring it. And it's something that I will continue to explore.
I remember talking to Chief Trask about that at one point, and he told me he thought the cost of implementing a good body cam program on the force would be about $1 million.
It very well could be.
He's talked more about the fact that it's the storage of the video, the management of the video, providing the video for requests on incidents, just that whole operational part of the body cam. It's not the cost of putting the camera on everyone as much as it is the program. At least that's something that he and I talked about. Have you looked into it at all? And are you planning to?
I have. And will continue to, and you've touched on all the points. That's where your cost comes from, how long the data has to be stored, the request, and everything else is a huge cost. But of course, yes, that's something I'm going to continue to explore.
Okay. getting back for just a moment to talk about where we are now with COVID and how the force is operating during this pandemic. There's that whole issue right now of enforcing COVID restrictions in terms of the sizes of gatherings, wearing masks, etc., and even seeing police officers wearing masks or not wearing masks. Can you speak to that for a moment? And
Yeah, so we've touched upon this before, and yes, ideally, do you want to give somebody a $300 fine for not wearing a mask? No, you don't. But that being said, we actually drive around with extra masks. We stop, we counsel children. We sometimes have to counsel adults and give them masks and explain to them the importance of it. If your behavior is so egregious, then obviously we're documenting it, and the Board of Health is probably going to fine you. I can't be any more blunt about that. I do not want, in these times, how could you want to fine anybody for anything? But if that's the behavior that you engage in and you bring that upon yourself, there's nothing we can do for you. You have to take these warnings seriously. And yes, there have been officers that have been reprimanded, themselves for not wearing masks. We can always do better. We stay on them. I think when things were good, officers got complacent. And you also have to keep in mind that the governor's orders have changed. So there was a point where you could be outside, and as long as you were social distant, you didn't have to wear a mask. And we do remind our officers now that that has changed. When you are outside now, regardless of social distance, you need to be masked.
so that would apply to detail officers, because you do hear
Correct.
people saying, I drove by a construction site, there were detail officers, they weren't wearing masks, they were standing close to each other having conversations. That's something that you hear rather frequently. So that shouldn't be the case now, right?
That should not be the case now. And I'm not going to sit here and deny it and say it never happened, and that's false, and it's addressed. And if it continues, we will continue to address it, obviously, with progressive discipline.
And the gatherings, the large gatherings that were taking place and might continue to take place, especially around the holidays, are you responding to all calls where people say there's a large gathering here, and what do you do when you arrive?
Well, that's a great question. So it will kind of let me clear up something. So simply because there is COVID and you can't have a large gathering does not give me or any other officer the right to go storm into someone's house and start taking a head count.
Mm-hmm.
If there's something we can clearly see, if we see that something, is out of control or we're there on another matter, and we see that as well, obviously we can document it. But, we've had the calls where I demand you to go into this house because I know this is what's happening inside. Well, that doesn't work like that. And there have been instances where we were on, in the area for something else, or we might even been at that apartment or house for something else, or even just a noise complaint. And yes, we could clearly see what was happening inside there, and it was documented and it was forwarded to the Board of Health.
What about during this whole pandemic with people being in their homes, not able to really move around as freely as they have in the past? What are you seeing in terms of domestic violence and child abuse during COVID?
I'd have to pull the numbers to give you exact numbers, but speaking with, the commanders, definitely mental health calls have gone up, domestics have gone up. I haven't heard anything about child abuse, but I would say anything that's driving people inside, you've taken people out of their routine, and it comes with a price.
Yeah, I would imagine that, these are all issues that are going to have longer term repercussions going forward.
Yeah. And fortunate for us here, we have a liaison with Voices Against Violence. We have a detective that we commit their time to nothing but domestic violence. So all that stuff is followed up on and, directed to other agencies for resources and everything else. And our jail diversion program, where it started right here in Framingham, they're second to none. So, whenever we do have calls of that nature as well, they're followed up on. And
when you say the jail diversion program is second to none, what do you attribute that to?
So that the jail diversion program started here 17 years ago. And I use the word time to get to, it's worth the input for the time. When I was a patrolman here, you were told that these clinicians are now going to ride with you and they're going to help you out on these mental health calls or any other type of calls that could, where somebody may just simply need to talk to somebody. And of course, you're skeptical being a young patrolman. Now in this agency, there is not one single officer, from me being the chief down to the youngest patrolman, that knows anything differently. And not only can someone request a clinician, the moment a call goes out that you think a clinician may be needed, the officer is basically saying, have that clinician at the side door so I can pick him or her up. It's not a program anymore. It's our culture, I would describe it as. And that's come over 17 years. And it's to the point now, my goal as chief is I want the clinician, a clinician is the jail diversion program, to be on staff just like an officer. And when I say that, I mean weekends, completely through the night, and holidays. Before we would just have the clinician during the day when we started. Then we went on to have the clinician till 4. And as you're fully aware, people don't say I'm going to have a crisis. I'll make sure I have my crisis from 8 to midnight, but not midnight to 8 and not.
Right. It usually happens when people aren't typically on. Exactly.
So we've expanded our clinician to the weekends. And in most nights, we actually have a clinician here till 3, 4 in the morning. And my goal is to always have a clinician on staff ready to go.
So the clinicians are employed by the police department?
The clinicians are employed by advocates and within the police department, but their true home is advocates.
Do they need police training? Do they need training to keep themselves safe, working alongside the police in these situations?
So there's a very rigorous interview process. They do a ride along before they start. As far as training, they don't go hands-on. We do equip them with a vest.
Yes.
God forbid if anything were to happen.
Right.
But they just basically get prepared. They know if something goes sideways or their safety's in jeopardy, they know to step aside and let the officer handle it. But they're very brave men and women. I mean, they go with us. They're out there with us. So they're not, if they're in a cruiser, they just might be out there, and they're also going to a normal service call. We don't just say, hey, get out, I'll come back and get you. They may not get out at the next call, but they're going to it.
It sounds like a role model program. You said that it's second to none. Is this something that is practiced commonly? Is it something that's unique to Framingham?
Oh, yes. Oh, no. It started here in Framingham, but this program is being duplicated, not only in just Metro West where it's being duplicated. I believe it's going to go up to Lowell. I actually had spent some time with the Lowell superintendent. It's actually being talked about across the country, especially in light of what you've seen across the country. People are calling for it.
Yeah. And what do you think of the name?
A lot of people in our own city didn't even know we had it.
This is why it's good to get out and make sure people understand just how much is going into this work. What do you think of the name Jail Diversion Program? Is that the right name for it? Does it exemplify keeping people out of jail? Is that the whole focus of the program?
When it started, I would say that was a huge focus, but it's expanded so much. Somebody in a mental health crisis, was jail the best place for them? Probably not. They needed help. They were calling us for help. And I know when I was a young patrolman in the 90s, somebody that was obviously in a mental health crisis, you might have locked them up for disorderly because they were being disorderly. Now we go to these calls and you can see that there's a deeper issue, and you try to get this person help.
Do you want to bring more people with those skills onto the force as well?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, you can't have enough, and I don't want to be without them.
Right, because you talked about 9 vacancies, and I'm wondering if those vacancies include the support staff, like in these positions.
We are actually engaged in looking for a clinician, but like I said, the process to find the right clinician is very rigorous. They don't just allow anyone to do it.
Right.
Advocates handles the hiring. There's obviously an internal interview, but so they are currently actually looking for someone as well.
Let's talk a little bit about what's happening with the police on a national level right now and how it impacts Framingham. I'm very curious about how you feel about this term defunding the police and what impact has that had really on perception, morale, just, the whole culture.
Yeah, it's obviously hard to hear. Um, I totally disagree with it. I think the program we just described, I would think you would want to invest more money into programs like that, more money into training. Some of the stuff that we heard, bias training and stuff like that. Why would you want to have less of it? If you want to decrease your budget, what always happens for us? Less training. You want to have more training. I'm not saying you got to go throw me. I'm asking for millions of dollars now, but why would you want to defund the police? Why not invest? Invest in the stuff that's being said. Let's be able to do better.
I mean, much of this comes from just the outrage over all of the excessive force, and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and just all of these issues that have just infuriated people to think that we need some serious police reform, or and that's where the term defunding came from. Police reform is different than defunding, and
Mhm.
stopping the use of excessive force is really behind most of this. What do you do about that as chief?
I think you just touched on it. Defund is not reforms, and I am all for positive reforms. I will work closely and have worked closely with Noble. I've worked closely with the Mass Major City Chiefs who are involved with that. No one's running from it. No one's saying it's not needed. They just want to make sure it's done correctly, and that we're doing it. And part of that is going to be training and outreach and stuff like that. So, I think you're right. I think some people think the word defund means because that's what you want. No, that means investing in your police, and not simply just with money. I've been on numerous Zoom calls. I've been at numerous, gatherings and protests, and I've spoken to people. I spoke to some people that just say, I simply don't like you. I saw what I saw. I don't like you.
Mhm.
And tell them I saw what I saw. I don't like it either. And I saw the same thing you saw. But I said, for us to go forward, we need to have a dialogue. We need to have an understanding. I now see where you're coming from. I hope you would listen to see where I'm coming from so that we can move forward. If we just want to simply have divide for the sake of saying, I don't like them because I know they don't like me, that's not going to work. We've changed nothing. We have to take what happened and be better.
As the first Black chief coming onto the Framingham force at a time like this, especially where Black Lives Matter has become uh, such a powerful movement, and we have our first mayor, and she is the first popularly elected Black female mayor in Massachusetts. What does this make you feel empowered to make more of a difference now? How does it make you feel?
It makes me feel proud. Um, if you told me this was possible in 1996 when I got on the job, I would laugh at you. And I
Really?
told you absolutely not, no way. Um, I just didn't think it, and I'm not saying that somebody would have jumped in my way and stopped me. I just didn't think the opportunity would ever be there for someone like myself.
Hmm.
Um, Coming up over the years, I've had numerous mentors, and you see other people, um, you know, excelling. And within my own agency, I've been mentored by women. I've been mentored by people, not of color, and basically have all taught me there's no limit to what you can do. So although, like I just said, we can always do better. I can speak to the changes that I've seen in the short time. Well, most would call it a long time. I call it a short time, but of the changes I've seen in this job. And that doesn't mean to get complacent. And I'm very proud to have that be the first Black chief here in the city of Framingham. And if that, can break down some walls, that's great. But I can't just sit here and say that well, I'm Black and I'm going to solve everything. That's not the case either. And some people, I have gotten the other side of it. Some people are upset, being a Black man and being a police officer as well. But, I have to sit and listen to those conversations as well.
That must be very difficult for you. Let's talk a little bit about that. How do you feel racism in Framingham?
How do I feel?
How do you feel it as a Black man in Framingham? How do you feel racism, and how do you feel racism looks in Framingham?
I wouldn't describe Framingham as the deep south, because racism exists everywhere.
Hmm.
Um, I would be sitting here lying if I try to sugarcoat it and say it doesn't happen.
Hmm.
But we have to, as far as the police, and I think that the police department gets, you cannot blame the entire solution of racism on the police department as well.
Right.
As far as us, we have to acknowledge it and make sure we don't emulate the steps, what's happened in the past. And that's a quote I get from Commissioner Gross of the Boston Police Department. I'm not going to sit here and act like things have not happened across this country that involve race. But it's my job to make sure we don't emulate those.
And looking at just how you deal with those issues in this city, I mean, it's been more apparent, I think, during the highly contested presidential race and the heated division, or I should say the exaggerated or the deeper division, I should say. Nationally, we've seen that play out locally as well. And a lot of the issues behind it have to do with race. Is there an opportunity for you to help educate the force and to provide more understanding of privilege and diversity and the things that help change the culture?
Absolutely. And we were actually doing that before George Floyd. We have it. A lot of the training that people are calling for, we have engaged in before the George Floyd incident, and we will only ramp it up now. But what's bigger than any training is, I'm going to go back to conversations. I'm not going to use her name, but there's a woman that was a very proponent of, she did not like us. She just did not like us. And she got to know a few officers, myself included, over the years. And just simply by having conversations and listening to each other, we broke down that wall. And there were some things she said that were valid. There were things that we said that were valid. And we basically grew an understanding of each other. And it just broke down those walls. And that's the biggest thing you have to do right now is I'm going back to relationships.
Yeah, building those relationships, nurturing those relationships. And whether you have to do it using technology now because you can't do it in person, or however you have to do it. I mean, it seems to me like this is a very big priority for you. And
absolutely. And I use a term, when every new officer is about to go off on their own, I call them in and I give them my little speech. And I always leave them with, you got to treat people the way you want to be treated.
mm-hmm.
But even if that's not big enough for you, treat people the way you would want somebody to treat your mother.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the biggest thing right there. People have bad days. People are off some days. Sometimes people they just need a little bit of compassion. And, I wanted to say this when you were talking about the divide in the country. No matter where you stand politically, that's your right. That's what, our country is built on. But for us, you just got to simply, stay out of that, do your job, and treat people the way you want yourself to be treated.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like you're giving good advice and sending them out with the support that they need and the thought process behind that support. And how are you going to deal now with the lingering issue, like maybe the reinvigoration of the Uri stamps issue and the public pressure right now with the public outcry to fire Officer Paul Duncan? I mean, this is an issue that really resurfaced now because of what's happening with excessive force.
Well, that's obviously, that's one of those difficult conversations that I have had that I'll have to continue to have.
Mm-hmm.
I can't speak on what happened 3 and 4 administrations ago.
Right.
I have to continue to have to continue to listen to people, and I know there's outrage. Obviously, everyone's full aware that the DA is relooking at the case, and that's where we go from now. But we have to learn from. I just touched on it earlier. We have to learn from what's happened in the past.
Has the DA have you been speaking with the DA at all about what the next steps might be or where it is in the process?
Just that, when they're ready to tell us, they will let us know, but it's still with them.
Okay. And just thinking now about different neighborhoods. You talked about different neighborhoods in Framingham and how things might be different in one part of the community versus another in terms of policing needs and the use of the force. What are some of the things that you might want to change or address within your first 90 days as it has to do with the different areas of the community?
In the first 90 days,
or say the first 6 months. Nothing really happens in the first 90 days other than trying to, big issues. There's a lot of planning, but
the biggest issue, and I wouldn't call it an issue, is just simply getting people out more. We have some recruits that are in field training, some more coming out. It goes back to what I was talking about of being reactive. I want to get people into neighborhoods. That's the biggest thing. Look at where we're duplicating efforts to have more officers. And a big one is, it doesn't seem like much, but those in neighborhoods that are looking for police service will think this is big. I need to know what you want from your police department. I've gone to community meetings, what I thought was the needs for the area, and I'll bring a PowerPoint and everybody can't stand me because I just had them sitting there for 20 minutes on my vision and of what I feel they need. And it's nothing, not one single person in the room wants to discuss that. And it may just be one neighborhood's biggest issue is parking. One neighborhood's biggest issue is, speeding vehicles, or maybe drug dealing or something to that effect. You have to get out there and you have to know what the residents want. And it varies from section to section. I'm not saying that I'm looking for people to have a divide and get special service here or special service there. No, everyone's equal, but we need to know what needs need to be tailored to that specific neighborhood, because they're not always the same.
Well, there are some perceptions about, where the crime exists in Framingham. You read about a lot more vehicles patrolling areas in around the Interfaith Terrace, Beaver Street area. You read about less police cruising up in the Northwest quadrant, and then there's that feeling about, it would take forever if we needed to call an officer to get to this part of town, but yet we have so much activity going on in another part of town. Do you look at the city in terms of those neighborhoods when you make assignments and when you decide where to put people, or is it just more reactive to what's happening on that day at that time?
No, not at all. So you want to, if one area has that normally may not be patrolled by a certain number of cars, if you have a night where you want to expand that coverage, you expand it. If something's happening in one part of the city that you have data for, that's, I'll use the car breaks. If you have car breaks occurring in one part of the city and you can show this, and you can usually also have it by time, obviously you're going to put extra officers in that area. But when it comes to the day-to-day patrol, you try to spread it out as equally as possible. And one part of that also, you talk about, people saying, well, this area has more people than that people. And that's not necessarily just somebody on their regular patrol. I'll use an example. We encourage officers to get out on foot down in the downtown area. We do encourage officers to get out on foot in Pelham and Interfaith and to stop by the rec center and engage children. But we also encourage officers when there's a game up at the high school, go up there. I've gone to, there was one year, I don't think I missed a home freshman game. So that's other reasons. I wasn't patrolling that area, but I felt it good that I should get out there and take in a Framingham sporting event.
Mhm.
Those are the other things I want to do. That goes a long way. Or just stop by, you know, stop by the libraries, stop by the businesses. That's another key thing that, you know, I remember, you know, I'll call them older. I'm that guy myself now, but an older beat cop. They weren't necessarily out there, you know, doing traffic enforcement or, you know, chasing after people. But if you told them somebody needs to be notified at a business, they knew that business owner's name. They knew where to get his number. They knew where his relative lived if they couldn't get a hold of him. That is so important. Just simply, you know, I'll use, you know, like take a Saxonville or an OPSCOT, an officer that works up there. I want that officer to get out and those people in those businesses to know his or her name. That goes so long, that goes so far. When you need information, when you need to share information, when you need to make notifications,
Mhm.
it just builds trust within the community.
Mhm. Chief, do you live in Framingham?
I do not,
Okay.
but I like I said, I was a transfer. And it's funny because, you know, when you transfer in, you know, you're seen as an outsider, but I've completely embraced the city. And like I said, I attend sporting events here. I've coached children here. I've embraced the city like I was born and raised here, and I will continue as long as I carry out my term and after. I love this city and I've embraced it as my own.
Let's talk for a minute about the school resource officers, because that's come up as a topic that needs reevaluation, fresh eyes. There's been a lot of discussion. What are your thoughts about that? And are there any changes that might happen when the schools reopen in terms of the deployment of school resource officers?
So yes, you know, that was a huge topic of conversation and will continue to be a huge topic of conversation. It was very eye-opening. The biggest factor that I got out of it is that the police department should not be involved in school discipline. That was presented to me overwhelmingly. You know, just simply, we need to let the school handle school discipline. You know, many still feel that there's a need for an SRO. I do feel that there is, but we need to just be a resource, outreach. We can't be involved in school discipline, and that was the number one thing that that came out of my numerous meetings. And with that being said, there are still people, and I still engage them in conversation, that simply do not want the SROs there, period. They just feel that a police officer should not be within the schools.
So what's going to happen? Are they going to continue to be there?
Yes, we're still working out. We're still with our memorandum of understanding. I believe we are still welcome there. And, you know, obviously right now, it's not happening.
Right.
In the future, we are going to still be there.
So what will change? Were they involved in discipline? Were they not? And what will happen with their responsibilities and roles?
One of the biggest thing, it wasn't necessarily dictating, I hope it didn't come across wrong, is dictating what the discipline was. It was more so simply being present. There's just things that school matters don't need to have a police officer necessarily present.
Wasn't the presence of threatening to some students
Yes.
more than others?
Some, absolutely, you just nailed, you know, simply being there. Some people feel threatened just by having the officer in the school. And then obviously it got ramped up if, you know, if I was an individual brought in for a school matter and now the SRO standing in the room, you know, for my my discipline.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and that goes back to listening. I would have never guessed that was a problem. And, you know, we have always also had, you know, a diversion program if someone has to go into court for juveniles. You know, we're not looking to arrest juveniles, and that goes from outside the school. You always try to summons a juvenile if you can. Mm-hmm. And there are programs in place for diversion.
When you were sworn in as deputy chief, your daughter pinned the badge on you, and you have another swearing in coming up as chief. Will we now see a 10-year-old pinning her dad as she did last time, or is that part of the plan this time again?
Well, all my badge pinnings have been with my children. I think it might have to be a combination. I don't think it's going to be able to be one on this one. But she never did one by herself, so that one was hers. But I anticipate seeing all my children take part.
How many children do you have, Chief?
3.
3 children.
Yes.
Okay. Well, and what are their ages?
17, 14, and 10.
Ah, you've got the 2 teens. Good luck.
Yes. Thanks. I need it.
Police may be one challenge, but teens may just be another. So
Yes, and it's a greater one.
yeah, absolutely. And I expect that now that the city council has approved your position as chief and the mayor's appointment, that the swearing in will be next. And obviously we look forward to that. And I want to thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your thoughts and your insights to the police department. I also want to let everyone who's watching know that to contact the Framingham Police Department, you can call 508-872-1212. And as you heard earlier in the program, you can go to www.framinghampd.org. There will be a lot more coming out of the Framingham Police Department with new Chief Lester Baker. So stay tuned. I'm sure he'll be back. I hope you'll be back, Chief, and we'll follow up down the road to see how things are going. Thank
Absolutely.
you all. Thank you
Anytime.
so much. And I want to thank all of you for tuning into the Audrey Hall Show, where you will always learn something new. Thank you.